So, my hair is a little wacky today, but I guess I shouldn't care that much because I'm talking about anime and they kind of have a lot of wacky hair in those shows. So, being a kid that was growing up in the '90s and grade school, I was one of the early adopters of Japanese anime in the youth in America. I know there were lots of other animes like Transformers and all those other ones that were from the 70s and 80s. So but when it comes down to it, with the the anime, I guess, gold rush of sorts really started in the 90s, when that abundance of anime started playing and selling and merchandising like it's Japan and America, like a Japanese invasion of sorts. And I was into the major ones like Dragon Ball Z. That was my joint. Pretty much all the ones on Toonami, like Gundam Wing and those ones. And then I found and went deeper with a lot of them. So I started buying a lot of anime and manga in the 90s and early 2000s. Went into Gundam some more. Not as deep as other people, but like, 08th MS Team. And then branching out into other stories. I really liked Oh My Goddess. My cousin got me into that. And I got deep into those manga. But why am I talking about Dragon Ball Z and Japanese cartoons? Well, over the years I've studied a lot of things, but particularly the one I practice the most is marketing. And I have come to appreciate Japanese anime in a way more than I ever have before. I kind of got out of it when, around the end of high school era for me, and was pretty much winding down with anime up until then. Wasn't a true otaku, I guess, as you may call it, especially with the animes that I've talked about. The true otakus are gonna say I was a poser, but in the 90s that was really all it took to be an otaku. But anyways, that aside, I've noticed in my study of marketing, and in a way I love studying marketing more than I love even practicing marketing, but I love what I found out the past couple of years about growth hacking. And that's something, it's a common term. Growth hacking, growth marketing is a very common term right now in tech in America. Silicon Valley has really made that popular in the US, but interestingly enough, anime made that popular in Japan for like decades. And I'm really fascinated how they use the minimum viable product method, where they'll come out with the manga in comic book form, and then they come out with the graphic novels, and then when that starts to gain momentum, they'll come out with essentially like a short movie about an hour to an hour and a half. They usually call these original animated videos. These tend to, if they get an audience, the data signifies that it's time to start making a episodic cartoon, and they start filming a TV show, or creating a TV show, animating the TV show. And when they get to the end of a season, they do more of the movies. So like when it's off, like in TV shows in America, like during the summer, instead of just being off air, they come out with some ideas that they turn into movies that they've been working on. And then depending how well those do, that can determine everything from the manga to the continuation of the series. And I think it's very, very fascinating that whether or not the TV series or the manga is more popular determines whether or not the anime cartoons are based off of the manga or the movies that come out in the summer. And what's interesting is when they start to have a franchise like, Dragon Ball Z, and now Dragon Ball Super, where it all kind of works in tandem, where the manga and the series and the movies are all influencing each other equally. And I think that's quite fascinating. And what this comes down to is I was looking into how they make, money off of this, and because they have much different, methods of making money, and they have different priorities when it comes to making money, that really blows away American paradigms. They really have an abundance mindset when it comes to marketing their art. And I found it really fascinating to find out that America is really one of the only countries in the world, I think it really is the only country, that has created an entire industry, a legal industry, off of copyrights and intellectual property when it comes to the creative arts. And here's what's really, really fascinating is the rest of the world tends to be competing with America. And America is, in a way, competing with the rest of the world. But I found that there's a lot of people that infringe on copyright outside of America. And what's really interesting is there's no way to stop it, really, outside of America, especially when it comes to things like merchandising. There's counterfeit merchandising all over the world, but in a way, what's really interesting is if they find essentially pirated merch in areas that, creative content isn't marketed to, marketers in America use that as a green light to start releasing content there officially for those audiences. They don't try and stop the pirates outside of the US because, interestingly enough, the marketers and the lawyers are two different industries. So the lawyers are working for the marketers, the labels, the studios, the publishing houses, all these things. The lawyers work for them, and they've created an interesting industry because essentially the creatives demand things like copyright protection, which is why the publishers and the marketers, they provide it for them. But what's really interesting is creatives and their marketers don't need this copyright. I know this is something I talk about a lot, and it seems like I'm beating a dead horse for a lot of creatives, but it's really fascinating for me to understand that things like Japanese anime in America have succeeded despite being weird and, off the wall and really culturally abnormal. And it feels like a cultural invasion of sorts that survives despite the fact that, no matter how hard we try and beat it with, American creativity and cartoons, anime is still, succeed to the point where now American animation is starting to mimic Japanese animation, which is originally where Japanese animation started. People like Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball Z, had huge inspirations from Walt Disney. I mean, Bibi D and his, son Bobby D and their creation Boo are literally inspired from Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo from that Disney, I forget which one it was, but if you remember what Disney movie that was, comment it below. And I find it really fascinating that things can work without copyright. And in fact, not only do they work, they actually work out better for creatives. Akira Toriyama and other creatives in Japan have had more success because of piracy. They've had more opportunities because of what we call piracy in the US. And I start to wonder, would the businesses like Hollywood or the record labels or the publishing houses have as much creative control if we didn't have those legal copyright middlemen? Because it's the legal industry that reaches out to the internet service provider, sends them a letter that their lawyers of the internet service provider forward to us, and they can't even tell us, because we're not their client, they can't even tell us that it's not from the internet service provider, which has all our information, and they can't tell us that they're not allowed to give that information to the lawyers that sent them that letter. They legally have to forward it because they represent the people who have your information, and they can't give your information to the lawyers that are requesting it. So that letter that's forwarded looks like it's coming from your internet service provider, but in fact it's coming from the lawyers that want you to reach out to them with a case number that is literally a legal admission of guilt. Now I've done a lot of research over the past couple of years because I didn't used to believe that copyright could ever be a good thing to infringe. Like, I spent my marketing career helping creative business owners. But my whole paradigm was broken when I started to learn that people like Neil Gaiman, the success of things like American Gods, his entry into television and specifically and breakthrough hits like American Gods is due to, he's made a lot of movies, but like he's gotten more creative control. His ability to say what cast he wants and all sorts of these creative control that he gets to have is because he went to his publisher and asked them to essentially pirate his own work. He wanted them to share American Gods freely. And they didn't really want to do that because, we've all been trained to believe by the lawyers that we need this copyright to protect, our ability as creatives to make money, and marketers, which are creatives in their own right. Like, they are a creative industry. They're the creative side of business. And we've all been taught that we need these things for protection. But in reality, when he released it, even for a month for free, and it was already, selling really well, it sold even better. Like 300% better. And this was all inspired by, his books were being pirated in Russia, where they were not selling it, and it was not only being pirated but also translated. And his books started selling better in Russia when they started selling them there. And I just was blown away by this, and I found so many stories from musicians to filmmakers to documentary makers to authors. What is his name? Jeremy Rifkin. He's attributed a lot of his success as an author. He literally consults with governments all over the world as a strategist for, abundance and, very, very interesting ideas that will help move the world forward. And he released his book initially on the Pirate Bay. And it was trending on the Pirate Bay, which he said contributed to it and actually resulted in it trending on Amazon. And I'm just so fascinated by this, but it makes so much sense. It's like Neil Gaiman says something like, how many of us have discovered our favorite author or favorite musician because we walked into a bookstore, we walked into a record store and bought, that to introduce us to them? No, it comes from referrals. It comes from somebody sharing, something with us. Their favorite album, their favorite song, their favorite music video, their favorite book, their favorite poem. And then we go out. Then when we become a fan, we become a customer. And this is so simple that the lawyers have hooked us, and they made us believe that we want to protect our creative rights. And it feels good to believe that the copyrights do that. But when was the last time we ever heard about a creative that says, man, I wouldn't be where I am today if if it wasn't for those copyrights. No, they talk about their fans. And when you don't have the money to pay for those lawyers, when you don't have the chance to get represented by a label or a studio or, a firm or something like that, sharing is the way to get that audience, to get that creative control. And it's worked for Japan. Obviously, it's working in a way that, Netflix has copied their model of production. And all these things are just starting to come full circle, and we realize that, me as a marketer now turned creative and content creator over the past year, I'm realizing I was wrong, and I inadvertently feel like I've lied to so many people, telling them that copyright, trademark, all these things are, good practice, when in reality, sharing is the most important thing. I mean, if other people are going to make a little bit of money off of selling your stuff to people, obviously they found a market that you weren't aware of, and those people are going to become your fans, and they're going to want the new releases of things you do later. In a way, it's like free marketing, that because, other people are getting paid to market for you, but you don't have to pay them. I mean, that's genius in a way. I mean, if your goal is to do some sort of performance or create more, even just create more, then, in a way, piracy is just free marketing. And that's something that, I'll spend the rest of my life, the rest of my career, whatever it is, trying to tear down this paradigm that I feel duped into. I mean, I bought into it hook, line, and sinker because these lawyers, they're smart. They're super smart. And I mean, they've been wrong before. They were wrong about the internet. They thought the internet was a fad. That's why they made internet sharing illegal. If we admit to it, we have to admit to it. If we never admit to it, they can't prove anything. I mean, even if they have your ISP number, you have to admit to it, because they can't prove that it was you in your house and not somebody else driving by who had your Wi-Fi they can't legally prove it. And I'm like, oh my goodness. All this time I thought that, copyright and these things were the way to protect creatives that I loved. And I realize now, if you're publishing things on your YouTube or your SoundCloud or your Spotify, that's all copyright ever was. Holy cow, copyright is just a public ledger of, this person released this. And what is the internet if not a public ledger? You can tie stuff to yourself, and you can get the same protection saying, this, I came out with this first. And you know what? People on the internet, they care about sources so much. I mean, we argue about this all the time. And with a little bit of digging, it's not too hard to figure out who came out with what first. I mean, that's why there are all these blog articles about, these songs, Will Smith's songs sound just like this song because he worked with Sony and they own the rights to that music in the past, so he just created new lyrics for that, melody and changed it up a bit. I'm like, this is the thing, guys. We're going to be protected, created. Will Smith essentially doing that stuff has made those songs perform better. So those leaks probably came from the very marketers that paid for those copyrights. The same way that, Taylor Swift recently, she said, she got permission from somebody whose, song she essentially made it sound pretty much just like. And this is different than, what happened with Pharrell with, Blurred Lines. They didn't admit it. They did, and they got sued. And in a way, almost, that's what saddens me is the person they got sued from wasn't getting what they felt they deserved, so they couldn't feel grateful that music that sounded like their music was getting popular, when if they had just done a simple marketing, like reach out to them and said, like, this sounds a lot like this. May have been inspired by this. Let me piggyback on this a little bit instead of suing them. Like, we need to be more into sharing as creatives, more into helping each other out. I mean, the creatives that get the most abused are the ones that feel like they're in this alone. The ones that stick together and do things together. The ones that collaborate and share are the ones that make it in industries. We have to join together. Take it from a marketer turned creative, because our whole point in life is to create art, and art is meant to be shared. And if we share abundantly, we will receive abundance in turn. When we give joy, we will get joy. And that's it. When we give value, we will receive value. And it's just, we live in an amazing time where everything's being turned upside down, where power is being given to individuals that used to only be held by, corporations and governments. It's getting a little bit hot out here, so I'm sweating up a storm. So I'm gonna wrap this one up. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If this upsets you, I'm sorry, that's not my point, is to, upset you. This is something that upset me for a long time. I didn't want to believe it. So please, look into it. Really dig deep. Because if I'm wrong, I want to know that I'm wrong. And if you need any of the resources that I found that have backed this up, please reach out to me. Please send me a message, and I will share resources. But, it's a lot harder to believe things that we don't know that other people are giving to us. So I really encourage you to dig into the unknown, dig into the contrarian opinions, and see that, maybe the people who we don't want to believe are onto something that can help empower us, especially as creatives or people that know creatives, love creatives. We need to share this message. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to sell services, not trying to sell products. I'm just trying to share what I know. And, you can take it and run with it and look into it for yourself. Please don't just believe me. Please, please, please don't just simply believe me. Teach yourself, dig into it. There's information out there. And the very people that we've been taught to be disgusted by may be the very people that have the answers that we didn't even know existed. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Hit me up with a message. Hit me up with a comment if you love this, if you hate it, if you think I'm dumb, stupid, whatever. Leave it in a message below. Leave it in a comment. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll chime in if I see anything positive being shared. Thank you for your time. Share this with anybody to, if you think they can benefit from this. If you want to share with somebody to tear me to shreds, do it. But please just, know that I'm grateful for your attention. If you made it this far, that's more than most. Thank you.